Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report. Dodgeball, shrinking government's waste in the fraud. We want to thank our partners tonight, AMAC, for joining us in this conversation, making this conversation possible. The Association of Mature American Citizens, more than 2 million strong, making a difference in today's country in so many different ways. And all throughout tonight's show, we're going to be taking a deep dive into how much waste, abuse, and fraud is actually harming you, the American taxpayer, and what the Trump administration and their partners in Congress is going to do about it to fix it. It's no longer a novelty issue in Washington, but rather an existential one. Why? Because the country is hurtling towards $37 trillion in debt. That's almost a once unimaginable amount. It is a crushing amount of debt. Now, led by the world's richest man, Elon Musk, the Trump administration is off to a pretty good start. Over the last few weeks, Musk and the House DOGE subcommittee have identified some stunning abuses, like millions of dollars in loans, federally backed loans, going to children. That's right, you heard me right. Thousands of people, clearly long dead, who remained on Social Security's eligibility rolls. Then there are small stories, too, that speak of the reckless elitism and how your tax dollars are being spent in Washington. Do we really want $1.5 million spent to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces? What does it have to do with us? Or how about $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia? I'm not making this up. This is what your tax dollars were spent on. The American people have already answered the question. Do they want to put a stop to it? The answer is a resounding yes, they do. A supermajority of Americans want government spending cleaned up and trimmed. And over the next hour, we're going to be talking to leaders on the front line of this debate, including the chairwoman of the House DOGE subcommittee that today had an extraordinary hearing about taxpayer-funded journalism organizations. Marjorie Taylor Greene will be with us in a second. We're also going to talk to the former Comptroller General of the United States, who spent decades probing and highlighting e-waste. He has a really incredible insight into it. We'll have a lot of other great guests as well, but before we get to that, I want to introduce my special co-host for the evening. She is the CEO of AMAC and my very good friend, Rebecca Weber. Rebecca, good to have you back on.
John, I'm so thrilled to be here. You know, it's not easy business making government work better or at least cost less. And the Department of Government Efficiency is really tackling a big one. They're rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in a system that's ballooned to over $6 trillion a year. So DOGE is promising to slash inefficiencies and rethink how Washington spends our money. And Americans agree. You know, it's time to cut the fat and get real about a government that actually delivers.
Yeah. It's an exciting moment, and AMAC has been at the forefront of this debate. Long before it was popular in Washington, AMAC was already leading the charge in this. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to tell everybody how you can get involved with AMAC and become part of that 2 million person strong army that is part of AMAC. Right now, you go to amac.us/no noise. You can check out how to become a member. Very special discount. We'll mention that throughout the show. But we're very lucky at the top of the show to be joined by someone who's on the front lines of this extraordinary debate. She chaired the hearing today that delved into a very important question. Do we need to spend tax dollars on taxpayer-funded news organizations anymore? We're going to get a great answer. Buckle your seatbelt. All right, joining us now from the great state of Georgia, the Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was just shouted out a few minutes ago by President Trump at an event at the White House. Congresswoman, great to see you again.
Great to see you, John. Hi, Rebecca.
This was an amazing hearing today. I think people got to see what elitism looked like and how disconnected these government-run news agencies are from the American people. I was thinking that maybe today the obit was written for government-funded journalism. Am I wrong about that? Is this the end of government-funded journalism?
Absolutely, it's the end of it. You know, like I said in my closing statements, they can hate us on their own dime, not the American people's hard-earned tax dollars. So yes, we need to end corporate public broadcasting and completely defund NPR and PBS.
You know, Congresswoman, I think Americans' concerns over this biased information being spouted by NPR, I mean, just look at their handling of Hunter Biden's laptop story and PBS's reporting on Elon Musk's actions. What do you share a little bit about what you heard from the CEO of PBS and NPR, and what information should the American people know about their views?
Well, it's actually shocking. Catherine Marr, this was her first time appearing before Congress under oath during a hearing. And, you know, she has so many past statements on her social media that are shocking. She called President Trump a sociopath. She thinks white supremacy is the biggest problem in America. She is as far left as you can possibly get. Now, listen, she hasn't been with NPR for even a year yet. NPR knew about all of her radical social media posts. They hired her anyways, because today we found out that 87 people that are on the board for NPR are registered Democrats, and there's not one single registered Republican on the board for NPR. So it's no wonder that they hired Catherine Marr. We also discovered that today on NPR's own homepage for all of their news that they're reporting to the entire country on the American people's hard-earned tax dollars, they didn't have one single news story on my colleague, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who had attacked Governor Abbott for being in a wheelchair. What a horrific thing she said. And it's so shameful. So their news is so biased. As a matter of fact, most of the news that they report, not only NPR but PBS, has a 90% left-leaning bias, and America's so sick of it. They are so sick and tired of it. So Americans have basically been taxed and forced to fund this left-leaning, hard left-leaning bias, and we're going to make sure that we stop that.
I can tell you one thing for sure. AMAC members really applaud your efforts, and we appreciate that you're putting a spotlight on this. We're also thrilled to see what DOGE is doing, and want to just shift a moment here to talk a little bit about the specific evidence that led the DOGE subcommittee to conclude that the recent attacks on Tesla vehicles and facilities are coordinated. Perhaps the subcommittee's letter suggested potential involvement of certain NGOs in those attacks. Can you elaborate on those assertions?
Yes, and that's an ongoing investigation. We're very concerned about the groups that are organizing these different so-called protests that have really led to firebombing Tesla dealerships, burning Tesla vehicles, even attacking regular citizens who are just simply Tesla owners and drivers. We believe that there is funding going and massive support going into all of these organized, dangerous and violent protests. And let's be honest, we've seen this before, right? Remember BLM? Oh, they were supposed to be, you know, mostly peaceful protests. And then we watched cities across America burn every single night. Police officers were attacked, over 93 police vehicles destroyed, and over $2 billion in damage all across American cities during the entire so-called Summer of Love. Well, I think this is the same playbook with the same groups and the same donors. And what we don't want to see is any federal tax dollars funding that. So this is an investigation that is ongoing, and I personally had asked our great new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to be looking into that, as well as watching very closely members of Congress like my colleague, Jasmine Crockett, who is fueling these so-called protests.
Yeah, such an important thing to tackle, confront hate on the front lines. Congresswoman, you mentioned this about the nonprofits, and it opens up a really interesting avenue for saving Americans' taxpayers, because there are a lot of nonprofits that got their tax exemption under the notion that they serve the public interest. But if they're lying, if they're not telling the American people the truth, if they're encouraging violence, they could be taxed on that money. That means new revenues for the government. Is one of the ideas you have to revoke some of these tax exemptions and treat these groups as taxable organizations going forward?
I think that's a great idea, John. We'll be looking at all kinds of solutions like that. But yeah, why would any group be allowed to be tax exempt and not pay taxes just like everyone else in this country when they're using their money to fund such dangerous and radical ideas and attacks on an American business? Tesla is an American business, and Tesla owners are regular Americans. By the way, most of them are probably Democrats, because they all believed in the Green New Deal and looked at Tesla as a cure to the so-called lies of climate change. But yeah, I like that one, John. We'll probably be looking into many things like that.
Wow, interesting.
President Trump, we know he's looking, or actually has issued a recent executive order aiming to terminate taxpayer-funded housing for undocumented immigrants. Now, this really emphasizes that those resources should be prioritized for American citizens. But it raises a question, what policies or legal frameworks previously allowed undocumented immigrants to access public housing assistance?
Isn't that such a shocking statement that you just said? Publicly funded housing for undocumented illegal aliens? None of that makes sense. Here we have senior citizens that can hardly afford to buy groceries these days. And, you know, they have to make choices between being able to pay their rent or mortgage, afford their life-saving medication, and really afford the cost of living. But yet here our government and many state governments and sanctuary cities and states have been housing illegal aliens. It's the most insulting, absurd idea, and I can't even believe it's happened. But yeah, that's definitely going to stop, not only with Republicans in charge in Congress, but definitely with President Trump.
Yeah, really remarkable. Congresswoman, there's obviously a sand clock ticking to get a budget bill that codifies everything that President Trump's agenda already has in place and all these incredible savings that you're identifying through your work. Walk us through a little bit of the process of how you'll be able to get some of these savings, get them into the budget bill and get them done, and when do you think that will be done?
It can't happen soon enough, John. I was one of those that was not happy about voting for a CR, but we are working very hard and looking forward to doing reconciliation between the House and Senate, where we can actually pass our budget and our policies and fund the government the way that we believe it should be funded, the way America voted for it to be funded. You know what else is an interesting concept? When we get that done, John, this will also shut down a lot of these rogue judges and the rulings that they have been making. Because with Congress, we're the lawmakers, and when we make laws, judges have to uphold our laws. So we look forward to putting into law things like complete border security so that a judge can't stop deportation flights. We look forward to getting those things done, and we can do that with our budget and reconciliation process. So we're hoping to see movement probably by the second week of April, before we have a 2-week break in April.